Hello, friends. Welcome to Wellness Wednesday. I'm so glad that you are joining me. As you pop in, whether you're catching this live or on the replay, make sure you say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from if you want. Today we're talking about type 1 diabetes. Last week we talked about type 2 diabetes. So today we're going to talk about type 1. We're going to talk about what causes it. We're going to talk about, more importantly than what causes it or what is it, we're going to talk about the root causes of type 1 diabetes. We're going to talk about the possibility of reversing type 1 diabetes and what that looks like. Here's a hint, you can reverse it. So let's dive in. Actually, first, if I am popping in your newsfeed, I am Audrey Christie. I'm a functional and integrative nurse nutritionist and energy medicine practitioner, currently working on my doctorate. So I'm just this far from being Dr. Audrey. So that's super exciting. I help women heal from chronic disease, autoimmune disease, from those symptoms that just won't go away. I also see people for acute issues that they're looking for natural and holistic remedies for. So welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. So let's dive in. So if you've been kind of following this journey along, last week we talked about type 2 diabetes, and I gave a analogy is the word I'm looking for, of an airport for type 2 diabetes. So we're going to use that same analogy for type 1 diabetes. So if you think of your body as an airport, you can think of glucose or sugars as the travelers, okay? So when you eat something, say you eat a donut, which is so much, there's so much I could say about eating a donut. Make good choices. Let's say that. So if you eat a donut, or if you eat donuts regularly, I say that's a bad thing. One donut won't hurt you. Eat a donut, the travelers of the airport start to arrive, right? So glucose arrives in the body, right? Now, the shuttle buses to the terminal is insulin, okay? Now, insulin helps to shuttle glucose lots of different places for lots of different functions in your body. So it shuttles it into the cells, it shuttles it into the liver, all sorts of places, right? So in type 1 diabetes, the travelers arrive at the airport and they line up, they fill the parking lot up, and then they're headed to their shuttle bus stop so they can go to the different gates of the airport. I've ever been to like a big airport like DFW, they have like a little shuttle train, and shuttle buses too. So at the type 1 diabetes airport, there are no shuttle buses. They're just gone. The only shuttle bus company in town, the Pancreas, has gone completely out of business, boarded up, it's totally gone. So what happens is the travelers, or the sugar, is waiting at the shuttle bus stops, and they just start to back up. The crowds get bigger and bigger and bigger. The glucose piles up and up and up, and there's no place for it to go. And chaos ensues, both at the airport and in your human suit, okay? So what can we do about it? There's several different things. We can look into the root causes, right? But first, we can prevent it from ever happening in the first place. And how do we do that? It's a number of things. So as you know, first of all, you should know that type 1 diabetes is just an autoimmune disease, okay? And if you make that connection and you go, well, heck, if it's just another autoimmune disease, and if you can heal and cure all of the other autoimmune disease, what makes type 1 diabetes different? What makes it different? Well, there's a lot that makes it different, but it is just an autoimmune disease, meaning it can be reversed just like the rest. Caveat is that it takes longer. Pancreatic cells take a lot longer to regenerate than almost any other cell in the body, okay? Lung tissue cells can start regenerating in 2 to 3 days. Liver cells can regenerate in less than 24 hours. Pancreatic cells take a lot longer, okay? So let's talk about prevention first. We know in autoimmune diseases like type 1 diabetes and like all the rest of them that there is a triad of things that happen to cause autoimmune disease, one of which is genetics. They say that genetics loads the gun and then the lifestyle pulls the trigger. So in this case, if you know that you have a history of type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes even in your family, and you are pregnant, you are expecting, then you can take steps then to prevent the gun from firing, right? Because you can't stop that your family genetics has loaded the gun, but you can prevent the gun from firing. So the way you do that is being very, very mindful of the maternal fetal environment. So that does include stress, but primarily it includes dairy and gluten. Those food antigens introduced during fetal development, and then after, in that first year to 18 months of life post birth, those are very, very critical. Those things pull the trigger. There's some other things that pull the trigger too. There's environment, there's chemical toxicity, there's stress response, there's infections like EBV and mono, which is mono, same thing, herpes and HPV. There are some other things that can pull the trigger, but the thing that you have the most control over is that dairy and that gluten. Get rid of it, right? Is mitigating and managing that stress. Stop doing it. Let's prevent TD1 at the beginning. Now, most people that come to me are well beyond that, right? They've already had their kids, or they were diagnosed as children with type 1 diabetes, or their kiddos have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So let's talk about some of the root causes for type 1 diabetes. They're very, very similar to the preventative measures. So number one, infections and co-infections that hide in the body. So these are the kind of infections that you get and they don't ever really go away. They're never really addressed. And so they stay dormant, right? And then they flare up in periods of stress and toxicity and other things. Okay. So those things are viruses like cytomegalovirus, EBV or mono, strep, herpes, and HPV. Those are the most common. That's not an all-inclusive list, but those are the most common. The autoimmunity triad, which we've talked about. So a genetic weak link, which can be turned on and off by environment and gut health and lifestyle and nutrition. The genetic weak link is the least important part. And then the most important pieces are the environment, internal and external. So the gut health, as well as, which is determined really by stress and environmental toxicity and chemical toxicity and all of those things, right? Stress response, right? And this is not just, like I mentioned in the prevention information, this is not just stress response for the kiddo, or the baby or the fetus. This is stress response for the mom too. Mental, emotional, environmental, and energetic stress response. Okay. Really, really important to have that stuff under control. And you cannot control the stressors that come into your life most of the time. You can control how you react to them. Okay. Another root cause is a food-borne root cause. So early exposure, really young exposure from 0 to 18 months of cow's dairy, right? And gluten. You can test for, and I suggest if you are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes or your child is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, to test for both IgG and IgA, so food sensitivity and food allergy to dairy and gluten, okay? We know that gluten, because it has an affinity for ripping holes in the digestive tract and the blood-brain barrier, and dairy because of the molecular mimicry of casein. So casein has a molecular mimicry that is cross-reactive with pancreatic beta cells, which means you eat dairy, it gets through the leaky gut into the bloodstream. The body, the immune system looks at it and it goes, that looks like and notices that it's a foreign invader or something bad, right? Because it's not where it's supposed to be. Immune system forms a defense against it. Well, then those pancreatic beta cells that look really, really close, the body goes, maybe we should get those too, right? And it starts to attack. It's an autoimmune reaction to those pancreatic beta cells. Other things to be aware of for root causes are mold. Mold is an environmental trigger, and it also helps to keep that disease and lots of other diseases going. So it could be mold in your environment. It could be mold in your food. Oftentimes it's a mold exposure in your home environment, your school environment, your work environment, depending on your age. And then heavy metals, of course, is a big issue, a big trigger for those, for type 1 diabetes. Now, the question that everybody wants to know, hi, thanks for joining, is can type 1 be reversed? Okay. Now, and I know nobody wants to say that, right? Nobody wants to be like, yes, you can reverse type 1 diabetes. I'm going to say it. You can reverse type 1 diabetes, period. If your doctor tells you you can't reverse type 1 diabetes or anything else for that matter, it's because they've never reversed it, not because it's not reversible, okay? So find somebody else. Keep going till you find somebody or somebody that can work with your doctor to help prove that doctor wrong. That's my favorite thing to do. So if you want to reverse it, there are lots and lots of steps. For most things that I talk about, including type 2 diabetes, I'm like, okay, here's how you DIY it. You can DIY it yourself. Here's kind of the outline. You can join the Root Cause Revolution membership. Here's the outline. For type 1 diabetes, it's a whole nother beast. So I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like, but no, it's not something that I generally recommend DIYing. You need some kind of support, okay? Nobody ever, like no practitioner, natural, holistic, allopathic, conventional, or otherwise, wants to say that you can reverse type 1 diabetes, but you can. And the reason why nobody wants to say it is because pancreatic cells take so much longer to regenerate than any other cells in the body, but they can and they do. It just takes major commitment. And we're not talking about like major commitment for 6 months or major commitment for 6 weeks or major commitment for a year. We're talking about years of major commitment. It is a total, complete 180 lifestyle change in order to achieve that. So you have to balance it, right? We know that the traditional allopathic pathway for the conventional medicine pathway, the mainstream medicine is to take your carbohydrates and match it to your insulin, right? That's what they tell you to do. When your kiddo is diagnosed or when you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, you go to diabetic education and they teach you to cover your carbs with insulin. And it's not that that is wrong. That's a survival strategy, not a living strategy. Okay, that's a strategy so you don't die, so your kiddo doesn't die, which is important. Yes, critical. Yes. However, the education shouldn't stop there. You shouldn't be given a handout, a flyer, and people bring these to me. I'm looking on my desk to see if I have one to show you, but people bring these to me and they say, this is what they gave me. And it's fast food and it's the carb count for all the fast food so that you can then cover it with insulin. That is not okay. That is not okay at all. Sure, it's probably okay information to have for that rare occasion, but that's not where your education should stop. I want you to just check in for a minute. If you are somebody with type 1 diabetes or if your kiddo has type 1 diabetes, intuitively take a deep breath, check in, sit with it for just a minute, feel it in your body. If your child has type 1 diabetes or if you have type 1 diabetes, and tune into this, eat whatever you want and cover the carbs with insulin. Is that light or heavy? Does that feel light or heavy in your body, in your heart, right? If it feels heavy, then you know it's not true for you. Okay, if it feels heavy, if lifelong covering your carbs with insulin feels heavy, then it's not your only strategy. It's not your only solution. It is a survival strategy, but not a life strategy, okay? Not a healing strategy. So let's talk about, can type 1 be reversed? So again, know that it is a major, in capital letters, commitment. And I work with people with autoimmune diseases every single day, and I don't use that term lightly. I'm not like, it's a big commitment. Like, it is a major commitment to do this, okay? But you have to know that people are doing it. People are reversing it. So what you have to do is eradicate root causes. We talked about some of those a minute ago, and I'll touch on some of that again. And then clean up the environment, internal and external environment. So the external environment that the child is in, home, school, work, daycare, wherever it is that they go, and the internal environment. So we're talking about healing leaky gut. We're talking about managing stress. We're talking about having the proper nutrients, okay? So if you're in the honeymoon period, right? If you've had preliminary testing where you don't need much insulin intervention, if any at all, this is the best opportunity to stop type 1 diabetes in its track and stop it fast, okay? If you're in that honeymoon period. And so when you're first diagnosed, you'll often say, oh, you're in the honeymoon period. You don't really need any insulin, or it's not, usually this only happens with preliminary testing. If you were somebody who had an episode, an incident, if you were sick and they couldn't figure out why and you ended up in the ICU, chances are you're already at the insulin dependent stage, but that's okay. All hope's not lost. But if you're in that honeymoon period where you don't need much intervention, if any at all, that is your opportunity to heal it in a normal healing phase by doing what I'm saying, cleaning up the internal and external environment, creating a safe space to heal, eradicating those root causes. Now, children and teens are difficult, right? But they're not impossible to do this with. The biggest issue that I see happening for people who try and fail is that it's not a whole family transition. Little Sally has diabetes, and so little Sally has her section in the pantry and fridge, and mom, dad, and siblings, or parents and siblings, or whatever that family unit looks like, they're all eating whatever, right? They're just, Sally has her food and everyone is eating whatever. Well, that's not cool for Sally, and you all are probably in need of an overhaul as well. So don't single out that child or teen and expect them to be successful with this. The whole family has to transition, period. That's just it. The whole family, right? You want to figure out the food sensitivities and allergies. So I recommend getting both the food allergy test and a food sensitivity test. Both are equally important. Food allergies generally cause the really fast reactions. Most people know what they're allergic to. Food sensitivities are those little things that keep that nagging inflammation going, that keep these disease processes going. Once you determine those, whole family food rules, not one particular diet, but guidelines. You want to do things like avoiding artificial flavors and colors, primarily whole plant foods, 1 serving of animal protein a day, absolutely no gluten, and absolutely no dairy for the entire family. Y'all, it can be done. We've been doing it for a long time in our household for reasons, not type 1 diabetes, but for other reasons, okay? Next, you want to get rid of all of the environment's toxins, not all of the environments, get rid of all the toxins in the environment, okay? So that means your water, tap water, well water, whatever you're drinking, it needs to be filtered. You can use something like an AquaTrue reverse osmosis filter or a Berkey filter to do that. Also, your shower water and your sink water, all of that needs to be filtered. You need to get rid of all the chemicals that you put on your body and that you put underneath your that's underneath your kitchen sink. So we're talking soaps and shampoos and makeup and all of those things. You have to make sure that you get rid of all of those toxins, okay? Once you start getting rid of the environmental toxins, you're looking at mold and heavy metals and all of those different things, then you can start working on the internal environment, right? That's all those food antigen information that I gave you. That is the stress mitigation. That is making sure we are sleeping and drinking water and all of those things, right? Once you are there, once all of those bugs have been worked out, then you have the potential of reversing and regenerating those pancreatic cells, right? Everyone is a little bit different. Once you have the body moving in the right direction, the right fuel, the right microbiome, once you have balance and root causes healed, then the metabolic stuff is going in the right direction. You're keeping the bad out and the good in. That's when you move into the potential of reversal and regeneration. Worst case scenario, you do all of this and you go through this and you reduce insulin dependence by 80+%, okay? You reduce insulin dependence by 80+%. My clients on average who are going through this process have thus far reduced insulin dependence by 92%. On average, where some of them are less than 8% away from not needing insulin any longer. Crazy, right? Freaking amazing, okay? So worst case scenario, you reduce insulin dependence by some absurd number. You reduce or eliminate the risk of further disease progression and complications. You reduce or eliminate the risk of developing comorbidities, okay? The number one best predictor of a secondary or tertiary, an additional 1 or 2 autoimmune diseases is having a primary autoimmune disease to begin with and leaving it untreated or just treating it with allopathic medicine, right? Diabetics have the highest incidence of heart disease, blindness, amputation, all of these things, high blood pressure, stroke. There's a laundry list of things that taking some steps now, even if you don't reverse it, even if you don't regenerate those cells, even if you're an adult with type 1 diabetes and you've been fighting this your whole life and it's not for you, you don't think reversal or regeneration is in the cards for you, I would work on that root cause of not believing in it. But if you can get an 80 to 92% reduction in insulin, what about a 50% reduction in insulin? Say you give 50% effort, you get that. Like, that is huge. That is a huge burden lifted off your shoulders. That is a huge reduction in the morbidity and mortality, the death and secondary health issue rate for you, for your family, for your kids, okay? So start making those changes now. So, okay, I always end my talks like this, and we're going a little bit long. This one's already at 20 minutes. So if you take one thing from this entire episode, whether you have type 1 diabetes or not, whether your kid does or not, know this: you can heal from damn near everything, okay? And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because practitioners that tell you that you can't just haven't done it, or they haven't done the research to know if somebody else has done it, okay? Because that's not what they do. They say, you have these symptoms, put these medications on, and you're done, okay? So please know that you can do this. You deserve to feel good. Your kid deserves to feel good. You deserve to be healthy and vibrant and live a long life. Living a long life isn't even that hard anymore, right? Like our average age, our average lifespan is like in the 80s now. But do you want it to be like really sucky? Or do you want it to be vibrant and full of life? And do you want to be that 85-year-old woman on a yoga meme or on a meme doing yoga at 85 or running a marathon at 70? Or, which one do you want? Or do you want to be stuck in your recliner, not feeling like you can do anything outside of your basic life activities? And I'm going to get off on a tangent here, so I'm going to quit. If you want to learn more about me, how to implement these things in your life, feel free to check out audreychristie.com. Feel free to hang out here. You can join the Wellness Circle, which is a free private Facebook group. I have tons of programs and resources. I'm an open book to answer your questions and point you in the right direction. And remember, I'm always, always rooting for you. I'm always, always rooting for your family to have your very own revolution. I'm so grateful for you hanging out with me. See you next time.